Hello and welcome to Interfaith Connections. I am your host, Jackie Fuller. Today we have in the studio Nancy Starr, keeper of the Labyrinth at Unity of Fairfax in Oakton, Virginia. Nancy, thank you for coming on the program today.
Well, I'm delighted to be here with you, Jackie.
Thank you. Now, if you can give us some background information about yourself and share with us how did you discover and come about with this thing called the Labyrinth?
Well, I'm very fond of the Labyrinth. I think the Labyrinth found me, and it was sort of a growing thing. I first encountered the Labyrinth. It's all been about Unity of Fairfax and the Labyrinth, but I encountered it at a workshop at Capon Springs in 1985, I believe it was, or 87, and James Jones, a longtime member, set up a labyrinth on the floor in the room where we were having our workshop, and I walked it for the very first time and didn't think much more about it, but it just seemed to keep coming up. I think the next time I became interested in the Labyrinth was when I had read just a snippet from Jean Houston, and I became enamored with her ideas of healing through positivity. And I went to hear her speak, and it just so happened it was at the Labyrinth Society. And so I went in to hear Jean Houston talk there, and I'll be darned, Jean Houston had broken her leg in Mexico City and wasn't there, but Lauren Artrist, who brought and popularized the Labyrinth in the United States, ended up taking Jean Houston's place. And so I encountered more of the Labyrinth than I actually had intended. I learned that Jean Houston had discovered the Labyrinth at Chartres Cathedral in France, where it is in the floor of the old ancient Middle Age cathedral, and brought it to the United States, but only for her workshops. And then Lauren Artrist, who is the Reverend Dean, I believe is her title, in San Francisco at Grace Episcopal Cathedral, went to her workshop, Jean Houston's, and the Labyrinth just really grabbed her attention. It's written in her book about the Labyrinth, Walking a Sacred Path. And she talked about the Labyrinth, and she had brought it to the United States and popularized it. In fact, there is a company, Veritas, that actually made our Labyrinth at Unity of Fairfax there and was purchased by another individual here in Fairfax County. So that was pretty much my first thing. And then, Jackie, I was fortunate enough to go to Chartres Cathedral myself. Once again, I went first as a traveler with my companion, and we had learned that if you go to Chartres Cathedral, you can't expect to walk the Labyrinth that's in the stone floor since the Middle Ages unless you go on Friday when they move the chairs. And so we planned to go there. We were there on Friday, and we walked on the Labyrinth at Chartres Cathedral. And then it just seems to come up and then lay down for a few years. And then another member from Unity of Fairfax, Carol E. Egan, invited me to go to Wisdom University, and it was a week-long adventure. Actually, it was a class, but it was also an adventure at Chartres Cathedral. And what was amazing is we got to walk the Labyrinth after all the tourists were gone, and it wasn't even a Friday. We were allowed in the cathedral. Lauren Artrist had a special, nobody else can do this. Lauren Artrist allowed us to go into the cathedral after dark, and there were candles around the Labyrinth, and we were able to walk the Labyrinth as a group by ourselves. And they played those ancient Middle Age hymns. And so it was quite an interesting experience.
Okay, cool. Now we're going to show a picture of the Labyrinth for our audience so they can get an idea what it looks like.
What it looks like.
Yes,
all
ma'am.
right. Good plan.
And with that, can you explain why it has like a maze look to it and the little kind of flower look at the middle?
I'll do my best, Jackie.
Okay.
Okay. I'm assuming your audience is either looking or it's soon to look at the Labyrinth. The Labyrinth is not a maze.
Okay.
There's a difference. The Labyrinth, if you follow the path, you will end up in the center. And you go in and you come out the same way. But with a maze, it's entirely different. You never know quite how to get out of it once you get in it. So it's not predictable. But what's really nice about the Labyrinth is that we in our lives, we go straight ahead. You know, we have a destination and we don't zigzag to get there. But the Labyrinth slows us down. We go one way and then we go another way. And there's some interesting thoughts about that, like our body recognizes itself, like our brains is almost like the shape of the labyrinth. The whorls on our fingers and on our feet, it's almost like the shape of the labyrinth in it. Our intestines, you know, they go back and forth. It's just not a straight shot. And so I like to think that our bodies recognize it. And because we don't go straight ahead, but go back and forth, what the labyrinth actually does to us internally, or to most people who walk it, is it balances the right side of the brain with the left side of the brain. And so we begin to think the way we're created to think. And it's a very calming thing. And since it's calming, it tends to put things in perspective. And then often, when I walk the labyrinth myself, ideas will pop up. Did I answer your question?
Oh, yes. And I'm glad you mentioned about ideas pop up, because I know people have used it as a meditation tool. Have you had any stories, or has people shared experience with you on how the labyrinth affected them in their lives as part of their spiritual journey or process?
They do. I wish more of them would sit and write their stories down. One lady from Unity of Fairfax did write her story down. I remember that the labyrinth touched her deeply, deeply enough that she put pen to paper and wrote something down, and we have it available at Unity of Fairfax. Very often people go in, and it's not only people who walk it all the time. Some people, there was somebody who was new. At Unity of Fairfax, we have the Labyrinth on New Year's Day, and that seems to be a very popular thing. And there was a lady who was new, and she talked to me about how to walk it. She wanted to know how to walk it. She got in there, and she started going any way she wanted, across lines, and she just felt a great freeing. This year, for our New Year's Day Labyrinth, there were families. There was a special time when it was a silent time, and so families sort of waited to the end when it wasn't quite so quiet. And families came in and they held hands. There was one young lady who danced on the labyrinth. And then we had a time when people who were physically impaired, they had their walkers, and they were walking the labyrinth with their walkers. So the labyrinth it's a canvas labyrinth that we set up in our sanctuary. It's open to all people. And some people say that when they have a labyrinth walk, even a finger labyrinth, some people like to just do a finger tracing of the labyrinth. Thoughts will come up, and memories that are almost sacred come up to them, that they had almost forgotten that they ever had. So I've heard these things.
Okay, good. And we also have a picture to show of the Labyrinth walk at Unity of Fairfax during the New Year holiday. So we want to share that with our viewers as well.
Well, good. That was a very wonderful walk for us. We make it more than the labyrinth because we had a peace ceremony first. That when you set up a canvas labyrinth, the tradition is, and it's suggested, that you warm the labyrinth, which simply means you get it ready to walk, but it's not just opening it up. It is actually sort of a ritual to warm it, and a labyrinth keeper, and this has been fun for me, can decide how it's warmed. And so on New Year's Day, we said different peace prayers for different traditions. There was an Islamic peace prayer, a Jewish peace prayer, Buddhist, Hindu, and so on like this. And then our church believes in the 12 powers. And we set a power. There are 12 edges and 12 powers, so it was perfect. We set a power at each of the edges. We lit a candle at each of the places, and we set a rose. And so that we considered warming it. And then we like to walk around the labyrinth just to entertain the energy that is on the Labyrinth.
Okay. And in addition to the New Year activity, where else in the DC area people can check out a Labyrinth or participate in a Labyrinth?
That's a good question. Please go to our website at unityoffairfax.org, and it'll pop up every so often, maybe during Holy Week this year. We're hoping we can get it down. Next one will be in September at our church for World Day of Prayer, but at Washington National Cathedral, every last Tuesday of the month, they have an open labyrinth walk, and it's inside. I've had people go to it, and they say, I couldn't find it. They looked around on the grounds. Well, it's inside the cathedral, and it's near the high altar, and there are 2 labyrinths set up, and there's a harp player. It's really, and it's like in a middle-aged setting, so it's really is, it's wonderful. And every month, there are quite a crowd on both of the 2 labyrinths. It's 6:30 to 8:30. That is a wonderful labyrinth walk. There is a labyrinth that's set up with pavers out at the Benedictine Monastery off of Linton Hall Road. I believe it's in Bristow, Virginia. And they have a lovely garden around it and a fence so the deer and the turkeys don't walk the labyrinth with you. But they also have, behind the labyrinth, after you walk it, they have 2 silos that you can actually go inside, sit down, and they've cut off the side of one of the silos and they put in stained glass. And you go and sit on stone benches and you look up and there's blue sky, hopefully. And it's just a very peaceful, meditative thing, inspirational thing to do there. And anyone can walk it. There's another labyrinth that's in Warrenton, Virginia, off of Business 29 on Church Street at Warrenton United Methodist Church. And I walked this one because I feel I can go at it. It's outside and it's a 24-hour labyrinth. And so if I feel I need the labyrinth in the middle of the night, that's my go-to labyrinth. It's extra large. It's a little bit irregular, which gives it personality. But it's made with flagstones, and between the circuits of the labyrinth, it's like a field. There's buttercups in the spring, violets. I've walked that labyrinth through the seasons. I've walked it when it snowed lightly. I've walked it in the fog. I've walked it by moonlight. I've walked it with butterflies going across the labyrinth. It has a lot of personality, and it's slightly different every time I walk it. Sometimes the grass is tall. Sometimes it looks like the grass has had a haircut.
Wow. It's just interesting because it's, you see the picture of it, you see it on the floor, the outline and everything, but it's amazing that it has like all these elements to it, and the access to actually doing this is like, it's pretty much, it sounds like it's all over the place pretty much, which is a good thing. And then 24 hours. So if someone gets up 2, 3 in the morning, they have a place to go to meditate. And it's interesting because, it's someone like, and I would be curious to know that one. Is someone just there and they just wait for people to come?
No, it's just there. And you just drive up, park the car, and go in. And if people are interested in going to the Warrenton one on Church Street, it's just shortly off of 29. You go, there's 2 entrances into the church, and you go in the second entrance, and it's right there at the right-hand side.
Okay. Now, in addition to that, if someone wanted to have a labyrinth in their own faith community, is that something you can advise them to do? Or like you said, there's a Labyrinth Society. Do they contact them?
There is a Labyrinth Society, and our Labyrinth is not yet registered with it and probably will be soon. But there is a labyrinth locator on it, and you can locate where outdoor labyrinths are, labyrinths to rent, and things like this. And also there is a number that you can call to talk to actually a person about labyrinths. And you find out a lot about Labyrinth Society gatherings and information about labyrinths in general. Labyrinths are overseas, and actually the history of the labyrinth goes back pretty far into antiquity, even before Christ. There were designs that were labyrinthian on the wall, like the Greek key, which is a famous one. It just never ends, and that is considered labyrinthian. It's just something that keeps on going forever. And then Labyrinths, ancient labyrinths were found in many of the European countries. And in the Middle Ages, when people, most people know if you're a Muslim, you're supposed to go to Mecca sometime in your life. Well, if you were a Christian during the Middle Ages, you were supposed to go to Jerusalem. This was a pilgrimage you were to make. Well, not everyone had the means to get to Jerusalem, so there was a dispensation. You could go to a large Catholic cathedral like Chartres, France, and you could walk the labyrinth there. And so this was not an easy trip from Paris, because it's over an hour by train to get to Chartres from Paris. So people went by horseback, by foot, and by horse. My understanding is the cathedral is large by Middle Age standards. People would actually bring their horses inside, and it's slightly sloped down, so I guess they could wash it out. It isn't, used that way anymore. But people, when they went there, they took it very seriously, and very often, since this was their holy pilgrimage, right, they would walk the labyrinth on their knees. And it's a pretty rough, well, it's smooth by stone standard, but on your knees it would be a pretty rough walk, I can imagine. I haven't tried that yet, but I've been thinking about it. Wow. Now, our labyrinth, which we have at Unity of Fairfax, made by Veriditas, and there are other, I don't mean to say one, there's a labyrinth company which makes wonderful labyrinths too, out of, I believe it is Missouri, St. Louis, Missouri. The canvas labyrinths are put together in 3 pieces, and they can be ordered. And you can find almost anything online about labyrinths, and almost anything, as you know. And it's a good source for information, Jackie.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm spin it back a bit to the labyrinth itself, because I'm curious about the middle.
Oh, the middle's the best part.
Okay.
All right, we've got to get a running start, except for it's a walking start. Before you start the labyrinth, it is good to stand at the beginning and to give thanks for what you're about to receive, which you have no idea what it is. And it's good to take into the labyrinth like a question or a problem. It's really good to take a problem in, because as you walk, this burning problem that's insolvable, all of a sudden you find yourself thinking about something else, and you begin to put it in perspective. And so you walk along the labyrinth, and you can stop. There's no right or wrong way to walk a labyrinth. And you can pass people. People may pass you. It's okay. But we're courteous on the labyrinth. And when we get to the center, there are 6 petals on most labyrinths. And each petal can be represented by a different thing. And traditionally, if you go, I always do it to the right, but I believe Lauren Artras's book says the first petal on the left, but I'm going to say the right because that's the way I'm used to doing it. First petal on the right is the mineral kingdom. And so you can stand in that petal, and I do, and I just take a moment to think about the stones of earth, the stars, things that are made out of minerals. And then I move to the next petal, unless there's a person there. Sometimes I have to bounce around a bit. But then I move to the next petal, and that is the plant kingdom. And I think about the trees, and I think about the flowers and the different plants, the grass. I like grass. And I'll just take time with something that's green and maybe something that's very pretty. Next is the animal kingdom. It can be birds, and I just take time, and I don't know what's going to come to me, but it makes it fun to see what it is. And after walking the labyrinth, some things do come up that you might not expect if you thought ahead of time, well, I'll think about this. And so after the animal kingdom is the human kingdom. And I take time saying prayers for my family and people I care about, and just the whole human race. And then the next petal, there's 6 petals, is the angelic realm. And so people who believe in angels, that's a good thing to contemplate, or guides, this is good, but a source that is a little bit beyond our own abilities. And then the final petal is called the Great Mystery. And people define it as they will. And life is the great mystery. And so some people call this great mystery God, Allah, whatever. But it's the great mystery that we all share and are a part of. And then for the final thing, a lot of people will go and sit in the middle or stand in the middle, just sort of for a final thing. But the place, the center, is the place of connection.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you, Nancy Starr. I appreciate for you coming on the show and sharing the Labyrinth experience with us. It's very unique. Unique.
Thank you very much, Jackie. This has been a delight, and I'll look for you on the Labyrinth.
Oh, absolutely.
And anyone else who would care to join us on the Labyrinth at Unity of Fairfax or any place else.
Okay. Thank you. And we'll be right back right after this break.
I helped turn my child's public school into a whole new kind of school. One with a curriculum that really motivates kids. One that has extended hours, 6 days a week, year-round. With loads of academic, cultural, and recreational activities. One that has support services like medical and dental right there. A school where parents' involvement is encouraged. Where teachers have more time to teach. And students are excited about learning. There's just one problem. My child doesn't ever want to come home. You can help turn your school into a community school for excellence. Find out how. Call 1-877-LOVE-TO-LEARN.
Welcome back to Interfaith Connections. I am your host, Jackie Fuller. For our next segment today in the studio, we will focus on faith and advocacy. And I have here today with me Debra Gold-Linick, Director for DC and Northern Virginia for the Jewish Community Relations Council, and Margot Grimaldo, CEO and President, Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. Thank you both for coming on the program today.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure.
Now we'll start first with you, Debra. Can you give us some background information about your organization?
Sure. So JCRCs exist throughout the country, anywhere where there's a sizable enough Jewish community. And we are the public face of the Jewish community to our non-Jewish neighbors. So we're involved in government advocacy. We're the primary players for the Jewish community in government advocacy at the state and local level. Then we also do interfaith relations, interfaith and intergroup. We are active in social justice services, and then we also do international and Israel advocacy work as well.
Well, let me tell you about the Virginia Interfaith Center. The Interfaith Center for Public Policy has been around we're now in our 32nd year. Our work is to be part of a very broadly diverse interfaith community throughout the Commonwealth. We work with our members and our chapters in many faith communities to advocate or educate around a specific core set of issues, either related to hunger and poverty or to underrepresented communities in the Commonwealth. And
are these member-based organizations?
Well, ours is. The Interfaith Center has individual members who become sort of donate their time and their volunteer their efforts. So yes, they're membership-based.
And then our organization is a member organization
Right.
of the Virginia Interfaith Center. And our organization, the JCRC, we like to think of ourselves as an organization of organizations. So if I could cut away from that word for a minute, but in essence what that means is that all of or most of the synagogues and Jewish human service agencies and nonprofits that exist within our jurisdiction are members of the JCRC, and we serve as their representative arm to government and law enforcement and schools and the media and all those sort of outwardly based programs we do.
Okay. And can you give examples of your advocacy outreach?
Sure. Well, so this year has been an important year at the General Assembly in Richmond, Virginia. Our offices are there, and we work closely, for instance, with the Jewish Community Relations Council on those issues that we have in common, right? So one of the things we cared a lot about had to do with making sure that everyone has access to health care that they can afford and that's good quality to them. That's been a priority for the JCRC and for the Interfaith Center, but also for many other faith traditions. So this year, for example, the Presbytery of the James in the Richmond area, they also went to visit their legislators about Medicaid, and so did the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Diocese of Virginia did the same, and so did the United Methodist Conference in Virginia. So there are oftentimes these common ground issues that we know would help people, that our faith traditions say, gosh, that's the right thing to do, and that's the kind of thing that we would work on together.
And that was definitely an area, probably one of the prime areas, where just a real breadth of the faith community was out in force, along with the nonprofit community. We also were involved together on issues. So Hillel's great statement, and I might paraphrase it a little bit, but if I'm not for me, who is? If I'm only for myself, who am I? And if not now, when? So we get involved in issues of combating bias, whether they affect the Jewish community directly or not, because if it affects one of us, it affects all of us. And there's been a lot of legislation, so anti-immigrant legislation that we've seen in the Virginia General Assembly in past years. And we were really pleased to be working in a more proactive and positive basis this year and last year to try to expand education opportunities for all Virginia students, regardless of their immigration status. And we'll still be working on that probably for another year.
Probably so.
That did not pass this General Assembly session, but there's a real breadth of the work that we do, and that's probably just a sampling of it.
Okay. Now, with working with different faith communities, how does that work in regards to maybe the tradition of a particular community, maybe like from the Abrahamic traditions, there may be one perspective versus another religion, maybe from an Eastern tradition? How does that usually work?
Well, so I think we probably work at lots of different levels. So there is our advocacy work, which we just described, but there's also a fair amount of work around the education opportunities to teach one another about our traditions. That is also a part of our Interfaith Center's work, and often happens in the context of our chapters. We have chapters in different parts of the Commonwealth, and we have in many cases, even when there's not a chapter, a core group of leaders who really do believe that we can do things more or better in an interfaith context than we might be able to approach otherwise. And so I think, when I've seen folks do that well, one example is in Richmond, many of the sort of top faith leaders there get together for regular discussions about their own faith so that we can understand one another better. And that really lays a foundation for the work that we may want to do when we're talking about public policy changes or other kinds of things that sometimes could easily divide us if we let them. But if we understand the foundations of our faith better, and then we can each approach it with greater integrity.
And one of the ways I find that so inspirational in the kind of advocacy work that we do is, so sometimes we're sort of lobbying and speaking directly with the politicians, but in the kind of forums that Marco's talking about, where we're engaged interfaith clergy to clergy or layperson to layperson, I think we're creating a model for the kind of civic dialogue that spans different viewpoints and different faith traditions, but yet shows an intrinsic respect for all. And it's something that we hope that we'll see more of in our elected officials, and something, at least in Virginia, that the elected officials at the state level try to pride themselves on continuing to maintain a more welcoming tradition.
And if I may, you sort of pointed to the Abrahamic traditions, and I think that we've actually grown a lot in Virginia, even just in the last 2 years. I've learned a great deal about the way that we can work well together, the Jewish traditions, the Muslim traditions in particular. We have really close partnerships in Central Virginia and at the All Dulles Muslim Society. We've learned a lot from those partnerships, and they've been very close allies in much of the work. But for example, just last year, it took a tragedy to bring us closer into relationship with the Sikh community, and that was as a consequence of the shooting in Wisconsin. But out of that tragedy we created an intentional opportunity for us to step in and get to know one another better and to build relationships that are continuing now, and we're just now figuring out what those opportunities may offer us in the future. So I think it does require us to be intentional about reaching out to one another.
Good. Now, are there any key initiatives that have been very successful and any challenges that the center has faced in regards to your work?
I think there are always challenges for the Interfaith Center because there are a lot of people whose day-to-day religious experience is not in an interfaith context. Okay. So probably two things. One, a lot of our work has to do with poverty. And I think that there really are some challenges for many Americans and many Virginians to understand the way in which low-income people are part of our daily lives and that we have a responsibility to care for one another in ways that not only benefit the person that we're providing assistance to, but to us and to our communities as well. And that's part of the conversation that the Interfaith Center is having from the context of faith. The other is really this question about bias and a lack of understanding for difference. And there is a body of work that the Interfaith Center has traditionally tried to work with, and with many of our partners closely with the Jewish Community Relations Councils and other faith leaders, a project called Rethink Bias. So in Richmond, for example, our most recent project was to teach people about religious difference and that it's okay to ask questions and to learn from one another. In this case, it was a series of bus ads that ran on the sides of Richmond buses with people in different religious headdress. And that was really inspiring because we got a lot of comments back locally from people, some of whom were perhaps disturbed by it, but others who were really moved and were pleased that we were doing something to take on, what might otherwise be seen as just, difference.
And so it was really cool what the center did with that Rethink Bias, because it not only linked with 5 seconds that you see on a bus ad, but each of the people, so the rabbi and the imam, and you had a Sikh individual with...
We had two young men who were the part of the Sikh Student Association wearing their turbans, and they were linked to their story online, so that if you saw the bus ad and went online, you would read their story, and you would learn why this particular tradition is important to them. And it offered you the opportunity to learn more about that experience.
And so sometimes you might not be able to measure in, dollars or cents or specific minds changed, but you're having an impact when you sort of get anecdotal feedback. And I guess when you're talking about faith and interfaith work, that maybe the dollars and cents and bottom line isn't always the best way to measure things anyway.
I think it's interesting. One of the surprises I think in that campaign, the young woman who wore the hijab, who agreed to have her photograph on the side of a bus, she was the vice president of the Muslim Students Association. And it would have been easy for people to make assumptions about why she wore the hijab. She's a young woman who chose to do that as an adult. It was not expected of her, but she took it on as a spiritual practice. And it was important for her to be able to tell that story. And I think it was important for many of us to read that as well.
So has there been any challenges with your work in regards to separation of church and state? Because you hear Virginia interfaith and then public policy.
Yeah. So, we approach this as, well, first of all, the separation of church and state works in two different ways. One is it's intended to really make sure that the state, that is the government, doesn't intrude on religious practice inappropriately. But then also that religious people, in the context of their nonprofit work, aren't unduly trying to influence government elections, right? So it's the electoral piece that often makes us a little bit uncomfortable. Our work is primarily about educating people regarding public policies that matter to their communities, and then giving them the opportunity to connect with legislators or decision makers that are important to those policies. And so that really doesn't violate the separation of church and state. In fact, many religious communities are engaged in a lot of policy choices all the time. Everything from making a choice about whether they expand and buy the property next to them and want it zoned a certain way, or whether they have an opinion about how their schools are being run. And it's often the case that people of faith in the context of their own community are making policy choices. We're simply giving them a broader platform to understand how those choices might impact the things they care about.
And is this the same with your organization?
Sure. So separation of church and state is a key and vital concern in the Jewish community. So as a people of a minority faith tradition, the idea that other faiths could not be forced upon us is something that we care deeply about and are sensitive to. And at the same time, as Marco was saying, there never was, a tradition or an idea from the Founding Fathers that people of faith could not participate in the public forum and in the public arena. And for many, I'd venture to say most of us, we're called to live out our faith. Mm-hmm. And so we have in Judaism it would be a mitzvah, it would be a commandment or something that we're really entreated to do, to take the things that we learn and believe and to bring those ideas out into the marketplace. Where that becomes a problem is that establishment idea of the First Amendment, where there is no established religion, there is no one set, and that's what government officials in a government setting, they're not allowed to prescribe what the rest of us are doing. And we're very thankful for that freedom, and unfortunately we have the opportunity to engage in that nearly every year in the Virginia General Assembly, where there's legislation that seeks to sort of expand majority-led religion in the public schools in ways that run counter to the Constitution and to Supreme Court guidelines. And we've usually been very successful in explaining. We try to be a very honest broker in saying where the line is, and our legislators have listened, and we want to continue to have that dialogue because we know that it's sincerely held beliefs on both sides, as far as people wanting to be able to express their views, but also to understand that by expressing their views, they shouldn't be imposing upon others and shouldn't be doing that under the mantle of government or public schools.
Okay. Next question for you. I'm just curious. Students, this area we have a lot of policy-focused young adults here. If they want to get involved or participate in some fashion with your organization, how can they do that?
Well, so the best thing is to visit our website at virginiainterfaithcenter.org. It is a very long name, virginiainterfaithcenter.org, all spelled out. Visit the website, sign up for our emails. People can choose to be informed about particular issues that they care about most, so they would be able to see what our policy agenda is and then sign up for emails that best suited them. I'd encourage anyone who really wants to perhaps be more engaged on those sets of issues or learn about public policy, especially at the State House. I think that would be an opportunity to get connected.
Both of our organizations are very involved in social media and electronic media, and so our website is jcouncil.org, jcouncil.org. Both of our organizations offer internship opportunities. I think yours are more at the master's level, or do you take college students too?
I've had college students before.
But so we love hosting college, and on occasion we've even had some special high school students as interns. And then we actually have a special track where JCRC will go into synagogue confirmation classes and talk with them about advocacy and invite them to host legislators to talk about what happens in the people's legislature. So there's lots of ways that we want to get students involved, and when they come out on our advocacy days, so as a board person, so with my hat on as a board person of the Virginia Interfaith Center, there have been whole social work classes that have come down as a class to participate in Marco's Day of all people. And I've also had students come down and participate with me. And we always set them up with adult mentors who've done the program before. And one of the recent times when we brought a student down, she looked around the legislature and saw all of these other students, 13 and 14 years old, about her age, and said, "What are they doing running around in these blue blazers at the legislature?" And so a final opportunity for students who want to get involved is that the Virginia General Assembly runs a PAGE program. And that student who did that 3 years ago is actually my daughter. And she became a legislative page the next year after she joined Advocacy Day, and then told her classmates about it. And there's continued to be a tradition at her middle school of students doing that. So I hope kids are aware of that opportunity. Very few are. It's a great chance to be involved.
And I also want to show our viewers the video from the center with your leadership explaining the work that you do. So I want to give the opportunity for them to watch that.
Faithful people in Virginia needs to make sure to understand that working in an interfaith organization does not mean you dilute your own faith. Does not mean that you park your faith on the side and you embrace some sort of a soup faith where you lose your own identity, your own authentic voice. That's not the case, you know. And the interfaithness is important about it because it brings these people together, talking together and working together.
I think God is in it for the long term, and we have to be too.
The center draws us together, helps us to not only talk about who we are together, but then also helps us to consider what does it mean to be in a commonwealth together, for the commonwealth of all the people who are citizens within this state, who deserve the basic human rights and the basic right to hospitality and the right to live with a welcome and a freedom here in our commonwealth.
I think the center is committed to justice. I think the center is committed to fostering sustainable change. I think the center is committed to genuine dialogue.
And it can't be the individual synagogue, the individual church, because you and I get up in the pulpit, we'll scream our sermons out. There's people will say, Rabbi, Minister, Reverend, you've got a great sermon. Did it change the world? And well, it didn't, unless somebody walks out of here and does something. But when we came to the table together, we became a force. And it's that force that's necessary out there in the public domain, beyond the walls of the individual religious institution.
If in our cities, in our political processes, people would put aside their other differences and really, when it's time to stand together to show solidarity in terms of basic American values, our society would be much improved. And Virginia Interfaith Center is one of the few institutions whose mission is to try and help make those things happen.
That means that we ought to be the good neighbor. That means that we ought to be the good Samaritan, that we look out for our brothers and sisters and make sure that they are given the same opportunities as the rest of society, and that their economic status does not hold them back.
That it's not something we're just doing for the moment because it's the popular thing to do. You know, if we're doing it so it lasts. And it fosters a better world in the long run. And we're willing to have the hard conversations, which is something that's very attractive to me, because these aren't easy conversations. And I don't think we have to try to make them easy. I just think we have to be willing to sit down together.
It's not just that I have been a partner with the center, it's that the center has been a very strong partner to help me to be more aware and to become more engaged in what's happening in the life of the state.
I think if you want to be changed, you will be changed by joining hands with those involved in the work and the ministry of the Interfaith Center. You cannot emerge year by year from this experience without being transformed yourself.
Thank you for the opportunity to watch the video. It was very informative. One question before we end this interview. Can you tell us, what do you do for fun?
I'm so sorry. I need to have thought about that one a little more. I'm too serious.
Pizza night.
Well, I guess this weekend, my daughter's celebrating her birthday.
Oh, cool.
And we'll be hosting a slumber party with 14 kids. So we'll have a very full house, and they'll each be making their own pizzas. And my husband was, I guess, made the decision that this would be a great time to do a business trip and head out of town. So we're gonna have a real girls' weekend kind of experience. And,
good.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Okay.
Well, I don't know that this is especially fun for everyone. I'm behind on museums. So I hit the portrait gallery 3 days ago. I'm going to try and catch up on some of my museum viewing this weekend.
Okay. Any particular art or anything in mind you like, or are you pretty much open?
I'm open. I just haven't made the rounds in the museums, and if things get prettier by Sunday, I might have an opportunity to go see them.
Okay. And one last opportunity to let viewers know how they can get in touch with you for more information.
So once again, our website is www.jcouncil, the letter J, and council spelled COUNCIL.org. My contact information is actually on our website under staff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love to hear from people.
I'm at virginiainterfaithcenter.org. Also watch for us on Facebook and Twitter.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for coming out today and sharing what you do to help the community and get the word out about the various initiatives and make sure people are involved in how to better their communities. So we thank you so much for that. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for hosting us.
Sure. You're
really
welcome.
Fun.
You're welcome. Thank you. And now we will go to another break on Interfaith Connections.
One breakthrough machine gave us insight into the bones, as another did for the heart, and another for the brain. Now doctors are using a new machine to practice medicine and save lives. The difference is, it's one you can use too. When you log on to medlineplus.gov from the National Library of Medicine and the National Institutes of Health, you're tapping into the largest, most comprehensive medical website in the world. Medlineplus.gov, the website doctors prescribe.
Welcome back to Interfaith Connections. I am your host, Jackie Fuller. For our final segment today, it is on the Four Chaplains, or also known as the Immortal Chaplains. They were 4 U.S. Army chaplains who gave their lives to save military and civilian personnel on the US-AT Dorchester, which was a United States Army transport ship that was sunk by a torpedo from a German U-boat on February 3, 1943, during World War II. It was sailing to Greenland as part of a naval convoy. There were 902 men on board, but only 230 survived. The story of the chaplains became famous because they gave away their life jackets to save those on board before they died. The 4 Army chaplains were as follows. They were Chaplain Alexander Day Good. He was Jewish and a rabbi. Chaplain George L. Fox. He was Methodist and a minister. Chaplain Clark V. Poling, Dutch Reformed Church, and he was a pastor. And Chaplain John P. Washington. He was Roman Catholic and a priest. We also have a video that we would like to share with you of the story by the survivors of the US-AT Dorchester on what happened on February 3rd, 1943. We want to share with our audiences so they can learn more about these heroic chaplains and just put in a piece of history how important it is that they sacrifice their lives for others. So let's take a look.
In the darkness of February 3rd, 1943, the U.S. Army troop ship Dorchester was torpedoed in a convoy off Greenland and sank in approximately 18 minutes. It was to be the 3rd greatest loss at sea for the United States in World War II. On board were almost 1,000 men and 4 immortal chaplains. They earned this title because they were witnessed to have removed their own life jackets and given them to others who had none. When some 700 men could not leave the ship, the chaplains remained to comfort them and were last seen linking their arms together in common prayer. A Jew, a Catholic, and 2 Protestants. In 1960, Congress and the President conferred on them its rarest award, the Medal of Valor, given to the 4 chaplains, and never to be repeated.
The captain had just said that there was at least five submarines trailing us. They picked them up on radar, you know, whatever they had them days, sonar. And they said if they hit you, that's when they told us, if they hit you, you have to worry, 2 minutes you'll be dead. So it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, I guess. And there was one escort ship, was a Coast Guard cut ahead of us, and 2 on each side, and the 2 freighters, and we were in the middle. And it only do about 12 knots top speed. And the Dorchester was losing speed, you know, with the heavy seas. And we dropped back out of the convoy. And there we were set right in the open. And when we were in the open, that's when they hit us.
And I was sitting in a stateroom right off the what do you call it, the starboard porch, starboard side I was on. And I'm trying to think what do you call it where you walk. Just the starboard side, gangway, whatever. I was on the right off the starboard side anyway. And we're sitting there playing cards and rummy.
I just come off guard, Dodie. I took my jacket off, and the next thing you know, boom, and before you know it, the ship was rocking. And who had time to even think about a life jacket at that time?
I went to snap the cards down, and instead of saying, gotcha, I raised the card like that. Everything went black. I said, what the hell was that? I said, we're hit.
I grabbed a hold of a life raft. Somebody pulled me aboard, and there was, we must have had about 20 guys on the raft. But I remember they piled one on top of the other, you know. And by the time they picked us up, I think we had 6 or 7 left. You know, they got cold and froze, and they just slid off. There's one guy hanging on the back of the raft. I held him up for, I don't know how long it was. Time don't mean nothing, you know. And finally, he was dead. I had to let him go.
We seen bodies all around drifting. And as I say, the chill of the water got most of them. They wasn't prepared for it. Many of them came out with just in their BBDs or underwear and never had any clothing on at all. And they were just drifting around. You seen those little lights bobbing up and down, and there was no life in the men that was in them either. So I walked back on the hull of the ship, and I come up on 2 chaplains, and one of the chaplains, one of the boys had the chaplain almost by the neck and hanging on to him and just screaming. And this chaplain was shaking him some and trying to get his attention and tried to talk to him and tell him to get on the fall line, keep a prayer on your lips, and I'll be praying for you. As he was putting them in, another one was putting them on the fall line.
When she rolled to starboard, and all you could see was the keel up there, and there was sort of 4 chaplains standing arm in arm on the top of the boat. And then the boat took a nosedive and went right down, and they went with it.
They never even made a move. They just joined hands, and the 4 of them was 2 Protestants, a Hebrew chaplain and a Catholic chaplain. And they made no, I asked Father Morrison, Father, get off the ship's going down. No, he says, go ahead, you get off. Because the ship was starting to list. But they made no attempt to get off at all. They just went down.
But they were all standing side by side, arm in arm, you know. So like looking up towards heaven, as you might as well say, you know. They knew that the time had come and they was waiting for it.
So he knocked on the door and the woman said yes. And she said she'd let him have the room. He said, I have a child, a wife and a child. And she says, that's fine. And so he was wearing his Army uniform, and on the collar he was wearing the tablets, which indicates chaplaincy. She said to him, what branch of the service he was in? He says, I'm a chaplain. She says, I've never seen that before. I've always seen the cross. He says, I'm a Jewish chaplain. And with that, Mrs. Hunt, that was her name, she said she was ready to return his $5 and tell him that she was not interested in Jews. You want this? So she said she felt sorry for him because he told her he had a wife and child. So she said he looked like such a nice person that she decided to let him have the room, which she did. And he eventually got his orders to go overseas and wanted me to meet him in New York City. But and asked me to please bring Rosalie, which I didn't do, which was so unfortunate. But of course he was disappointed he didn't get to see her. And I spent 3 days there with him, and we said goodbye, and it was a very difficult goodbye. And I looked at him through the windows of the train. I was crying and he was crying, and I knew I'd never see him again. I just felt it in my heart. He was a selfless individual. He couldn't do enough for anyone, and a very kind man, but a strong man, had strong principles, and he lived by them. That was his whole life, bringing the world together, people of all faiths, all colors, all creeds. And I think those were very prophetic words, because today that's exactly what we're trying to do, and that was 50-some years ago.
The image of the chaplains are also featured in various locations across the country. At the Pentagon, there is a stained glass window image of the Army chaplains at their chapel. There is also a memorial dedicated to them in Ann Arbor, Michigan. One of the books that has been recommended to us by the Immortal Chaplains Foundation is titled No Greater Glory: The Four Immortal Chaplains and the Sinking of the Dorchester in World War II. And that book was written by Dan Kurzman. In addition, a U.S. postage stamp was issued in their honor in 1948. The stamp went through 3 revisions, in which one of the revisions also mentioned their faiths, but the final version did not list their faiths. And please note that February 3rd is also part of World Interfaith Harmony Week. And this is a great opportunity to continue to honor those chaplains whose work has been doing very much to spread a message of interfaith cooperation and service to others. For more information about the chaplains, please visit the following organizations: the Chapel of Four Chaplains, which is based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and that website is www.fourchaplains.org. And the other organization is the Immortal Chaplains Foundation, and their website is www.immortalchaplains.org. We thank you for watching Interfaith Connections, and we hope you continue to follow our show and all the things we have going on. For more information about the show, please visit www.interfaithconnections.squarespace.com. And you can follow us on Twitter at www.twitter.com/IFCTV show. And thank you for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.